Good evening, and welcome to the Whiskey Wednesday edition. Joining is at least my second favorite co-host, the Ninja, Dr. Jason Pittman. Today, we're going to be talking and expanding upon the conversation we had Sunday Coffee with TK and its small business big problems. What kind of problems and challenges do small businesses have? And how might they adapt, overcome, and move forward? I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and this is EchelonOrchid. Ninja!
Shogun!
How's it going?
Excellent, man.
You know, I keep trying to figure out who my first favorite co-host would be, and I've really thought about it. It might be my future self. I just haven't figured out how to time travel yet. But outside of that, you're at least my second favorite. I can't think of anyone outside of my future self, maybe.
Hey, cheers, man.
And to you. So are you hydrating? Is that what's on the Perrier today? Or is that vodka?
Pellegrino. Yeah, I'm just a little tired, man. I had a nice, long, hard cycling ride this morning, and I got early class tomorrow morning, so I figured I'll be a little responsible, even though it's St. Patrick's Day. What are you going to do? The bottle's green.
You know, I always go, I'm not Irish. I do have the luck of the Irish. But speaking of luck of the Irish.
You certainly got the gift for the gab, bro.
Yeah, sure. But speaking of the luck of the Irish, Notorious cashing in. What was that? I mean, if my numbers are correct, if I remember, I think it was like, didn't he make like another $180 million off of Proper 12 when he sold his $180 million? So he only had that for 2.5, 3 years, maybe something like that.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, look, and if you just think about it hypothetically, let's say he took all of his money from the Mayweather fight, which he didn't, but let's say he took all of it, all 100 million, and that's what he invested to seed it. Well, he almost doubled his money.
Yeah,
not too bad, dude.
Not too shabby, right? And people can say whatever they want about Conor McGregor. He's no dummy. It's definitely, he at least that people could say. He is smart enough to make sure he has the right people around him in order to make good business decisions. Well, that's all you need. I mean, think about if Mike Tyson had Conor McGregor's people around him. Like that dude would be he'd be in the Fortune 50. I can term or the 50 most wealthiest people in the world, I would imagine, because he made so much money.
Yeah, if he didn't have Don King. That's all he needed was not Don King. Well, look, and the fact of the matter is, let's take an extreme example and say Conor McGregor is a complete dummy. He's a complete dummy worth a couple $100 million. So don't think he cares.
I'll take it. Yeah, what's interesting is he doesn't really respond to a whole lot of people on Twitter. He will respond to other fighters, though.
Yeah.
I mean, again, he knows how to promote.
The fact of the matter is you can't be a complete moron and luck your way into a couple $100 million. Not outside of winning a lottery, right?
Yeah, and not keep it.
Exactly.
Right now, so, if we fast forward, 10 years from now, is he broke? I'm willing to bet no. I don't think he will be. I mean, I think he's, from what I've read, he's trying to kind of start his own, fight club, gym. Mm-hmm. He wants to be a promoter. He gets it. He sees what Dana White has done. Right? He's no dummy. He's seen what people like Don King have done. It's all about promotion. If you can promote the fight, you're making money regardless, as long as people show up.
Yeah, right. I can't remember a lot of pro wrestlers' names, but I sure shit remember Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Yeah.
Right? I mean.
All right. So speaking, not just about wrestlers, but speaking of just stuff that I saw that was, man, I don't know if you saw it or not, but I gotta say, Brendan Schaub's Showtime comedy special, horrible.
I would suspect so. I've not watched it. I'm not terribly interested.
there was a couple of pieces in there. Like he had some good bits, and he might be able to make it as a comic at some point. I mean, it's tough. I mean, but I'm like, I'm like, dude, what are you wearing? Like, what are you trying to come off as? Like, what is your stick here? I don't get it. And I mean, I definitely got where he basically was like the whole reason why he stopped fighting was because of the last fight when he fought Ronda Rousey's husband. Wasn't that who he fought?
Yeah, Travis Brown.
Yeah, and he's like, I hear this. He's like, I'm like warming up, and he's like, and all of a sudden I hear, boom. I'm like, what was that? And I hear it again. I go to my coach, like, what's that? And he goes, oh, that's Brown next door and one of them. He's like, what? I'm fighting that. He's like, yeah, I got hit and my lip is like all split. I don't see anything. 14
Sent to the
stitches,
shadow realm.
14 stitches on the outside, 12 stitches on the inside. And I, what's his name? Brian, whatever. It's also, yeah, Brian Count. He's like, we took a taxi from Vegas back to LA. And we figured out how I was never going to get punched in the face again.
Yeah, and then they did a Joe Rogan show, and Joe Rogan told him the truth that he needed to hear. It was uncomfortable.
Yeah, I get it. So, and then he so he thought that was okay. But I really liked was when he talked about the first time he got like high because Joey gave him a gummy, and he ate the whole thing. And then he goes to McDonald's and he spends like $3,600 because he needed to eat. And he said, I'll pay for everyone's food because he skipped like the line. It was like 2 a.m. He goes to the front of the line. He's like, I'll buy everyone's food. Yeah. And he's like, I spent $3,600. And he like starts listing all the stuff he ate and then throwing it back up. And I'm like, oh, but good shtick. That one was pretty good. So out of like the hour special, like 10 minutes was worth watching.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, I didn't have to pay for it. I'm like, oh, Brendan, I hope, I mean, his podcast that he does with Brian is pretty decent on occasion. I mean, they definitely got more views than what I get.
Well, to be fair, man, we're not main carding a UFC fight.
Not yet.
Well, hey, man, I don't ever count myself out.
I might promote one. You never know. Anything can happen.
Right. You never know. You never know, man. I'm not going to say no to an opportunity the first time I'm asked.
Yeah, everything all depends, right? Yeah. Everything depends on circumstances and timing.
Yeah. Right? Well, things are at least worth mentally exploring.
Yeah, so check this out. So, don't know if you caught a little bit of mine and TK's last episode where we started talking about, because we piggybacked again off of what our conversation with Tom, managers, leaders, where managers do things right, whereas the leader does the right thing. And so, our favorite hillbilly, Stoney, he asked, he's like, well, how does that differ in a small business? Because you don't have that many people. So, how do you, and, I still think it's, if you are working in the business, then you're not working on the business. It's about, being able to get those multipliers, the scales of, economies of scale. And that means I need people doing the right thing so I can go think of the things that are right that need to be done, for whatever that is on the business. If I'm in the business, it's like being, you can't see the forest because of the trees. You're right up in the tree. You don't know, you don't get the full breadth of how big this forest is. So then I was like, all right, I got this small business that's being started. And I know you've got one as well that you're working with the missus, as I do. And we got hit with a snafu the last minute.
Uh-oh.
And so pulling all the permits, get ready to start that remodel. Like, we're ready to go. Contracts are signed. Everything looks good. City comes back. Oh, you're not currently zoned for distillery.
Classic.
What? I'm like, what do you mean? Well, I'm like, we're the same as a microbrewery. Like, there's no food. Like, just straight up a brewery, microbrewery, small size. No, we treat a distillery like industrial ethanol. I'm like,
ooh,
but we aren't. They're like, and the city planner he was a cool cat, right? He's like, well, we're kind of archaic. We haven't really updated. He's like, but we don't have any distilleries in Elkhart, so right. This is how we do it. Like, but we do have people making industrial ethanol. All right, now so you do a couple of things in this scenario, or maybe a handful of things. Maybe there's some things I haven't thought of. You could go like, well, that's it. Throw up my hands. I'm not dealing with this. Because because, oh, by the way, the other little monkey wrench was, if you don't submit it by this Friday, the amendment, then I won't be able to get you on the April planning committee and with a final decision in May. You won't get into the planning committee until May with the final decision in June. So if you don't get it in by this Friday, it's a 3-month delay. If you get it in by this Friday, it's a 2-month delay. I'm like, shit. I gotta get this done.
And it's Wednesday.
Well, I found out Monday evening, right? But you're pretty close. You're pretty close, right?
Tuesday, it might as well be.
Yeah, Tuesday I'm having to figure out zoning in Elkhart. Dude, I don't even know where to go, right? At this point. So I could do a couple things. I could give up, like, no, well, we're screwed. I can't get this done. Can't do it. I could like, well, if I get it done by Friday, then fine. If not, But I looked at it and I started going, I'm not making a 2-month decision. I'm making a 20-year decision. So even if I'm delayed by 2 months, so what? And the aspect of 20 years worth of months, what's 2 months? Right. I mean, I would much rather them just told me, because everyone believes I'm going to get this amendment. Like, it's not a big deal. I've put together a pretty good case as to why. I mean, the big thing is that the EPA classifies drinkable alcohol as a Class 1B liquid, which I had to find all this stuff out. Like, I'm like, it's all so much stuff I had to read, and I had to do it fast. And I got to say, if it wasn't for basically the training of my doctorate, I don't think I could have consumed this much data that fast to make a decision to write 6 pages worth of information to build a case as to why I should be granted this amendment if it wasn't for that. But I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to get this stuff done. I could do this. I've pulled off bigger things in a shorter period of time. But I kind of said, I'm not going to let this. I'm going to break this down in small chunks. Let's just get through the first question, and then the second, and then the third. I'm just going to break this. I'm going to break down this very complicated process into some complex parts, of which I know how to manage complex parts. Small chunks at a time. I will iterate on those, and I will improve. I'll get some people to review my stuff. Like, I got the contractor to review it. The city planner was gracious enough to say, hey, I'll take a look at it and just tell you if there's anything that appears out of whack. None of that. Contractor liked it. Got everything done, because now, mind you, I'm also not even in town at the time. So I have to have everything done, not by Friday, but by Thursday, because I got to overnight this stuff.
Right.
And I've got to get the landlord to sign off on everything, because he's the owner, not me. He's got to kind of give me a power of attorney. I did it. I got it done. But I was like, I wonder how many people would have folded.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, to me, that was a small, I had much bigger problems. I mean, first part is, at least with doing a distillery, well, there's a lot of competition. Yeah. So what? I feel like I can make a better product. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that feel like they could probably make a better product as well, but they're not.
Exactly. Well, I mean, we've talked about this before in some ways. Ideas are cheap, and that's not because the idea doesn't have value. It's because the idea by itself carries no value. It's embodying or enacting the idea that actually carries and generates value. And most people aren't willing to endure the failure that goes along with trying. Because very often the first try isn't the correct solution, right?
Yeah, definitely not. And I went and I visited I've visited a lot of distilleries over the last, couple of years. What I found is there's a significant amount of them that have been in business less than 5 years that are making some pretty damn good coin.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason, they're making a good product. That's the biggest thing. They're making a good product, and it's different.
Mm-hmm.
I had this one which gave me another idea, but I never thought of it. So they so I'll put out there, so it's like, hey, if you make it down by the creek, you don't need this zoning. And I also can't sell it legally. If I'm only looking to consume, I'm fine. I can figure that out.
You can trade it for goats.
Yeah, I can trade it for goats, and I'm trying to make something better than that corn liquor. We need some good stuff out there.
Where I come from, we call it varnish.
Varnish. Stony stuff is pretty good though. I gotta give it to him.
Hypothetically.
So this one distillery, it's pretty damn good, dude. I gotta tell you, I dig it. I didn't think about it. So they went with the one part that I had thought of, which was just, they went and got a used cognac cask. Good idea. Second thing they did is they went and bought a bunch of Irish whiskey and blended it with their 6-month aged whiskey, throw it in that Armagnac cask for another 6 months. That was tasty.
Yeah, I bet. It sounds like it'd be good.
Yeah, and I'm not a big fan of Irish whiskey, but that Irish whiskey with their whiskey and that kind of, because I had their regular whiskey, which is pretty damn good. Like I get it. That blend, I'm like, all right, they've taken it up a little bit of a notch. I mean, it probably, they're not losing money. Like their regular whiskey, they were selling for like $35 a bottle. With the Irish whiskey blend was like $70, so it's not unreasonable.
No.
And they aged it, like the Irish whiskey they said was 4 years old, so still a young Irish whiskey, which was fine. But once you're going to get rid of a lot of those off tastes by putting it into that cognac barrel.
Right.
And they're using the Solera method, which is great. Really dug that. For those who don't know, the Solera method is for every however much I take out, I'm putting back in, so the barrel never goes dry. So basically, for all theoretical purposes, a barrel will never deteriorate. Not as long as you keep it keep it wet, because you can keep putting what's called like a barrel wax over it. So if something starts to leak, you throw the wax on it, and it'll just keep things moving. It'll go. I'll be dead before that barrel were to die.
Right.
And then it's transferred to another barrel.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, man. I think one of the biggest problems we're facing in our business is whether or not we should put Active Directory in Azure.
I'm pretty sure that's not it. Pretty sure that's not the biggest problem.
No, not at all, man.
Because one, in Chinese sweatshops where you're getting stuff done, they don't even allow Azure into the country. So
it's the Alibaba version.
Oh, but I know a guy. If you need to get Azure Active Directory done,
Azure
Stoney's available for the right price.
For us, it's really how to leverage technology, kind of like what you've been doing. We talk about with this podcast, and how you've been doing different experiments with SEO contracting and let's generally call it an abstract level marketing, because of the type of business it is. The equipment investment was already done because it's stuff she already had in her workshop here that she was using to generate things on a smaller scale. But now that she's opened it up to teaching people how to create these things, quilts, different sewing outputs or products, let's call it, right? It's how do you market so that you can have essentially a subscription, right? And so, okay, I'll contract with you to teach you X classes, and at the end you'll have Y product, and that's going to cost this. And so not only structuring the pricing, but marketing to get a certain number of subscribers to that service, and then scheduling becomes an issue, which luckily her and I have a background, and this is how we met, working on labor scheduling and inventory management, albeit in fast food restaurants. It's not that different, dude. You have product, and you have things that go into the product, and that has to be managed as inventory, and then you're going to sell it for a certain price, and then how do you market it so that people want to come buy it? And so the way we've tried to approach it is, well, look, man, you signed a 2-year lease, so that's your runway. You don't have to boil the whole entire ocean right now. What you need to do is make sure you can cover your rent. Okay, that's a solvable problem. So just get that many students, and so like we did a thing where we contracted with some of the local schools to go to, let's call them like their career fairs, right? And set up a little information booth. And let's say that costs $50. Well, if she only gets one student out of all of them that she did, that not only covers that entire marketing nut, but she actually generates profit off of it. Okay, that's your bar. Get one person to sign up. That's all you got to do, dude. Done.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is people want to take and they want to look at, oh my gosh, this costs us so much money. We're doing this. Okay. Well, we know this is not a couple week decision. If I looked at everything in the microcosm of right now, if other people did that, we're not going to ever solve any problem. Right. So, we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but I was listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson the other day, and he said something which kind of relates, to where you're like, hey, we're spending all this time, or actually, I think he said we're wasting all this time on privacy, which we should be using to get out of this universe, out of the solar system, because at a certain point in time, that sun's going to stop existing. And he broke it down a little bit to the much more near term, which makes a whole lot of sense with just about everything, really. And that is, we could have an asteroid hit this planet at any time and potentially cause humanity to go extinct. We don't have to wait for the sun. So if we can't figure out how to be in space and potentially defend ourselves there, or to get to Mars and habit it, then we don't have to wait for the sun. That asteroid could take us out too. And the amount of money that I think we're spending in that space exploration, I think it's only like 0.25% of the overall federal government budget. Yeah. That's not that much.
No.
So to me, risk reward, the monetary risk is pretty low. The event of an asteroid hitting the planet and causing us to go into an insurmountable ice age or worse, that impact's pretty high, because I die, and I'm not looking to die for at least a couple hundred years. So, maybe we'll see Mars in my lifetime. But when you start putting it in that kind of perspective, 0.25% of your budget, worth it. But for other people other people that are thinking more short term go, yeah, but what do I care about Mars? Like, I might not see Mars in my lifetime. No, you might not. But if we don't start that today, when the asteroid does hit, if it hits, or as many scientists believe, it's not a matter of if, it's when. We get hit with small things all the time, and we can handle it. And we do know that there was likely a one large one that caused a mass extinction event. So the probability of a second one happening is higher than than what the first one was, because the first time maybe it happened more than once. I don't know, but hey, we should probably start thinking about those things. I look at that from a small business perspective. If I'm not worried about, I need to worry about 10 years from now, but I'll never get to 10 years if I can't figure out how to pay next month's rent.
Right. Right. See, and this is what I think.
You got to solve both problems simultaneously.
Yeah, and with a small business, to some degree, I think you have to be a leader and a manager both, and knowing what to be when to solve the problem appropriately matters. And so I also think that's why when you talk about writing things down, that's why writing it down is so important, because at least for me, in my view, so not only for me in practice, but in my opinion and view and observation, writing it down allows you to divorce yourself from it as if it was something somebody other than you were carrying out. And so you can maintain that distance. Here's another perfect example. I have this group of students working on research, and it's coming up due pretty soon. We got to get something submitted. And I met with them today. And the one person was basically stuck and couldn't move forward because the scope of what that person was trying to accomplish in a short amount of time was too large. And because they were working on it, they didn't have the distance to view alternative solutions. Well, the solution's simple. We need to produce a 50-word abstract and a title, and it needs to be submitted. That's the objective. So we don't need to do all of it to do that. What we need to do is, why don't you just, okay, so what we're doing is spread over years from 1997 to 2020. And we have to collect a set of data from each year and then analyze it. And I'm like, well, look, man, we don't need to do all that time for just that part. So why don't you just draw out 4 random numbers representing the years, start with 1997, that's number 1, and then generate 4 random ones. That's 4 more, that's 5. That's a decent sample. Just work on that. You take 2, you take 2, I'll take 1, because I can do 1 and still maintain my objectivity. And now we're positioned correctly to produce a title in 50 words. Done. Had I not written stuff down, I wouldn't have been able to make sure that I kept the distance, right? Because the proclivity, I think you have this too, is because I know I can do it and I know I can do it fast. Maybe it's easier if I just do it all myself. Well, okay, whether that's true or not, that actually doesn't solve the problem, because the problem is the students, and I'm not begrudging them, they're students, so they don't know. They're not going to learn how to do this for themselves if I do it. It's important that they learn how to do this and manage this scale of objectivity.
Yeah, so here's a great example, like with the distillery business. So unlike, running this down by the creek, I'm making it, but I don't have someone out there then selling it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When you're making the spirit, you are making a thing, right? But as the leader, you got to have someone who's, okay, how do I know that they're making a thing right? They got to check on it. But I can't watch you every step of the way. But I can check before that stuff as I see the cuts. Mm-hmm. All right, yep, this is the hearts. This other stuff, save it to keep some consistency in future batches. But for the most part, these are the hearts. This is what we're keeping, right? That's the cuts. I don't have to be there directly at every moment as the cuts are being made. It's an 8-hour process at least, because, it takes, a good hour and a half just for me to heat the still up.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's got to, at that point, then I'll start producing some stuff and you start tasting it. Well, I can be doing other things, and which is easier. Like I have to break down my days. I can't, if I can only really, but once that liquid starts coming off the still, I got to pay a little bit closer to attention as I feel like I'm getting closer to the hearts, because that's really the key. As you're constantly tasting, because that way you know.
Well, see, and I think this is one of the things you and I have in common to a very high degree. And I think this, in part, I'm guessing, comes from our almost identical background from our first startup that we worked at as network engineers, right?
Yeah.
How am I so productive? Well, I know how to stack and queue. It's that simple. I queue something up that I know is going to take a certain amount of time, and I let it run. I write down what's going on so I don't have to remember. I can just go read what I did. And while I'm waiting on that to finish, I'm doing something else.
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is you've only got a couple of ways in which you can do queuing. First in, first out, last in, first out, or based on priority, prioritization of traffic, right? And sometimes, hey, if I've got plenty of bandwidth available, do whatever, right? Don't care. But as the bandwidth starts to tighten up, well, the prioritization of what becomes important is crucial.
Yep.
I'm not going to pay attention to the things that can be done tomorrow because I got to do the things that need to be done right now.
Right.
And that priority queuing, especially from a networking perspective, becomes extremely important. Hey, during March Madness, which we're getting ready, which we're almost there, I got to limit my traffic to sports sites because people are trying to stream the basketball games all day long, and we've got a business to run.
That's right.
During that time, ESPN traffic, CBS, all of the sports stations, they get put specifically down to throttled at the bare minimum because I got the credit union needs to be able to service the members.
Right. Well, see, and that's exactly what we're talking about, really, with like my estimation of Conor McGregor's personal wealth. Okay, again, let's assume he is a complete raving idiot. Dude, you don't make a couple $100 million by making bad decisions. Bad decisions don't result in wealth, right?
Not generally. Not generally. I mean, you can get lucky once, right? Maybe twice if you're one of those people that so believe that the sun shines on a dog ass at least 12 or 2 times a day.
What?
Hey, it's something Stoney came up with. I don't know.
I was going to say, dude, that's some straight up hillbilly down by the creek talk.
I don't know what he's doing down there.
Right, because even if you somehow stumble,
he's like, I live in Tyson, but that's not the creek where he's going to.
Right,
there's no creek in Tyson.
Because even if you hit the lottery and luck into it, if you're making bad decisions, you're gonna part with it very quickly. Which the science completely supports that with the lottery winners, which is why they're almost all destitute in a very short amount of time.
They don't understand how to do it. Yeah, if I ever won the lottery, dude, I don't even know how someone like that could go broke.
Well, I'll tell you, the first thing I would do is not tell a fucking person, not one person.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the problem is that for you to claim your prize, it's public record. They want, but you might be able to quash that, or something. Like, oh, dude, that's a deep fake of me. That's not me.
No, man. I'll send my chief negotiator. My chief negotiator, for the record, is my 6-year-old. Like tonight, she's taking a bath, and I'm like, hey, listen, I got to go do this thing with my friend Dan. Remember my friend Dan? She's like, yeah. I'm like, now listen, it's important tonight that you don't try to trick mommy into letting you stay up late, because last night she tricked her. You know what she said to me? Well, that she did that to herself.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. High five. That's my girl.
Yeah.
Get them to believe that they tricked themselves.
Yeah. I mean, it's valid. It's fair. It's a fair statement.
See, and I think that's really the way that you, at least for me, I try to balance this interaction or this interplay between leadership and manager, especially in a startup or a small business. I mean, my largest research group, there's 5 of us. Okay, not the largest, but not the smallest, and I still have to balance that. Well, outsmart yourself, and so you have to figure out how to be a mastermind even for your own behavior. And so I know those moments in which I have a compulsion to get too deep into things. And so I just rig it so that I can't.
Yeah, well, that is because we have been doing this for a while and have been burned so many times about allowing, we'll say, so in this positive intelligence class that I've been taking, which it was several episodes ago when I posted with Leisha. She's a certified coach in that, and she's kind of helping along these lines. There's this thing in their teachings that they call the judge, and the judge is one of your saboteurs that everyone has. And this is the biggest thing that will prevent you from being successful, right? And so, how do you defeat the judge? Like, a lot of us are like, okay, like again, I can make, oh man, this is too much work. I'll never get this permit done on time. I'm not good enough, constantly like that. You've heard me talk plenty of times. I like feeling like the underdog because that's the judge in me saying I'm not good enough. There's people out there better than me. Why would anyone bet on you? And so I got to bet on myself, right? That's me rising above what my own inner fears are. And I know, okay, What's a way to allow my judge to come out? Well, I'm going to put frameworks in place. Like, okay, here's how I'm going to constrain myself to focus. And I thought about it. I was listening to this master class on dog training, and specifically, if you're training a dog on a leash, one of the things to do is you've got a fence on one side and put up some cones down the other, and then you walk your dog, and it will naturally follow that straight line as you're walking, and you go back around, and because you're in between it, so you can keep walking, and they will start to walk in a straight line. We've put constraints in place to narrowly focus us at a time in which we need in order to, quickly move forward, and then maybe we can broad back out and open up. But we know for certain periods of time, I know I have to do it like this at this moment, so I'm going to get my tunnel in, and then once I'm through the tunnel, then I can do whatever.
Yeah. Well, see, the other powerful thing I think about that kind of technique is that you're choosing your own suffering. It's not being chosen for you, right? And so that's why I'll create those constraints for myself, for my own teams, and that's the leadership part. And then I can flip over once that's all pre-decided. Like we've talked about how we plan our weeks and stuff, right? In terms of work, same idea, right? I'll create my own constraints once that's all pre-created, pre-chosen, pre-decided. Now I just got to show up and manage it. Okay. Well, now I'm not stuck in a situation where I have to do both at the same time, which is not tenable for very long. At least not for me.
Yeah, and so even when we've talked about that, I still, even more and more so, my working on the business, that planning of what needs to be accomplished, still takes up well more of my time than the actual working in the business does. Doing. And I get those economies of scale by having good people around me that believe in that vision, and then we're all working towards that common goal. But
That's right.
But that wouldn't happen if they didn't. Again, I'll just go right back to the dog training thing. Like, the thing that which I've always kind of known is that the most important thing first with your whatever, in this case we'll just say a dog, is that you have to establish that trust, and that trust happens over time by just being around. Which is because once that happens and they trust you, then it's easier to start conditioning them for trained responses. And then it's about consistency with those.
Yep, exactly.
And like that with everything, once people trust you, then you're able to break through some barriers and move forward towards whatever that common good is. But that trust is hard. It's I would think even more so because we're still very tribal people, and we want to be around people. And COVID's kind of prevented that. So I'm wondering how much real damage might we have done to society because we haven't been able to be with our tribes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially for kids that haven't been able to go back to school full time. I think those effects are going to be profound, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know that we know the ramifications of all those things, and especially, I mean, I started thinking the other day, I'm like going, man, what if one of my parents died from COVID and I was not permitted to see them during their final moments? Or if it was me, and or them, that they're having to go through those final moments by themselves.
Yeah.
How much damage is that going to do to people, knowing that because it's really, when death happens, the mourning is for the living, not for the dead, because the dead's already dead, right? Maybe, like I believe that there is an afterlife, but other people necessarily don't. But even still, that person's dead, and I'm still left here, and I had no closure. I didn't get the chance to say that goodbye. I wonder how many people went through that, and how much psychological damage has that caused?
I mean, I can only conjecture, but I'm going to conjecture that it's going to be immense, especially over time. I mean, well, look, I mean, I'll talk a little more about kids, because I think about, okay, how many years before the deep profundity of whatever effect has taken place shows up in the freshmen that I see. Well,
you'll know next year.
Yeah, well, we know this, and we've known this for a very long time. The science is sound. Human beings develop on a pretty predictable scale over time, and so those developmental cycles need certain inputs on those intervals, right? And if we know, if you don't get those, your development, your maturation gets vastly delayed, and the more it's delayed, the more pathology develops, and to the point where it may not be rectifiable. And yeah, that could
well,
have.
I think everything can be, I don't know if rectified a good word. I think the impact
Treated.
Yeah, I think the impact can be managed. I think that there's ways in which maybe it can be treated. You may not ever be made whole, but a way in which you could deal with it. But then isn't that a sort of PTSD-like event? And then couldn't those people, I would imagine that they should be able to file for disability, and that disability is covered in insurance. And then we're already worried about all insurance costs, but that's going to increase insurance costs because, look, psychological treatment is not cheap.
No, because it's limited in its provider scope, right? And it's time intensive. It's very labor intensive. I don't know, man. There's certain developmental pathologies that after a certain point in that cycle, they're not treatable, like hyperaggression or violence. Man, you basically have from 2 to 6 to get it corrected and socialized out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Same thing. It's the same thing with an animal too, right? Someone is predisposed because of DNA imprinting. Like there's just certain things you can't do, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have to curve that prior to them becoming a teenager.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I don't know, man. I can't imagine there's no effect. It seems to me that it's going to be non-zero. I just don't know what that number is. If you're like putting it on some type of quantitative scale.
I don't know either. And I just sit there and I've been thinking about it though. I mean,
I'll tell you what I really think the real problem though is. I shouldn't say it that way. Here's what my biggest concern is most immediately, is that in order to compensate for it, higher education has basically waived all measures of differentiation, right? And so now. This is particularly the problem with mental pathology too, right? Or mental trauma, is unless somebody's going to be honest about it, you don't necessarily know that they're suffering, right? And human beings are funny. We don't like to talk about it because it gets stigmatized. I understand why. It's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate, actually. And so now, not only do I not have a way to differentiate between student A and student B such that I can actually try to intervene and do something, but unless they tell me, I have no idea that they're actually experiencing it. Until they get into the classroom and they start performing poorly. Well, then I'll tell you what happens, because we've seen it. That's how you get grade inflation. I've seen it, at least in the high schools that for instance, my nephews are in. They got sent home. There was no more school last spring. And instead of what I thought would probably be the more proper way to deal with it, at least on the scope of society, is to say, look, man, this sucks, but we're going to have to repeat that semester. No, what they did is they basically, literally, gave everybody an A and just promoted them. Whoa! Wait a minute.
So speaking of that, I was reading this article the other day. There's something very similar that's happened to this kid in high school in Baltimore, I think, is what I was reading. And this dude had something like a 0.15 GPA, not 1.15, not 1.15, and I kind of go, how do their parents not know?
Yeah.
And maybe the school didn't do the right thing and didn't notify them. But then I'm kind of going, how do you get a 0.15? Well, from what I read in the article, I mean, this cat just didn't show up to school.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You're
Right.
basically just not even showing up at that point.
Yeah, he like only showed up for like the 4 years. I mean, my stuff could be way off. Anyone can, correct me, my numbers. But I want to say something like out of the 4 years of high school, he only showed up a total of 100 days.
Yikes!
Isn't there like 180 days of school per year?
Yeah, I mean that's a big number, dude.
I mean, I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm going, man, and how did we just promote this cat? Like, okay, who thought it was a good idea in the 9th grade to go, all right, this cat's got a 0.15. Let's go ahead and go to the 10th grade.
Yeah.
That doesn't do anyone any good. I don't get it. And so, with universities, and we've seen what we believe and what we feel with particular individuals being allowed to stay enrolled and keep taking their money to feel like it's criminal. Like someone should say, hey, look, maybe this person just isn't the right field for you.
Yeah, right.
But I want to go back and give a little promotion for this Sunday, because when you talk about a stigmatism associated with mental illness, there's a lot of stigmatism around, and I've got a special guest that's coming Sunday with Amelia Zachary, who is going to be talking about some stigmatisms that have to do with, one, having survived rape, a pretty brutal one, and now having bipolar. She's been diagnosed with bipolarism, and with that, the stigmatism associated with it. And she's, very intelligent lady, and I'll put some links out there for her. I'm very, very, like, in speaking with her, I go, there are so many people out there that are probably suffering from some type of mental illness, and that treatment is available and can probably help you, but yet our judge and ourself prevents us from seeking these treatments.
Yeah.
I believe it's going to be a really great episode with it's certainly I don't know if it's really a coffee first thing in the morning type of thing, but I feel it'll be interesting. She definitely is someone that I think worth listening to, because, hey, she's been quite productive while having all of these bad things happen to her and having a mental illness, and is doing quite well. So, I know everyone's got a different story. But she's certainly one that's proving that, hey, you don't have to let these things keep you down.
Right. It's not the end of you. That's not to minimize the trauma. But it's really a celebration of how resilient the human spirit can be when we learn how to silence that internal judge to some degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I find powerful about those stories.
Yeah, I hope, just like with many of the guests that we wind up having on, and even with our talks and our talks with TK, hopefully someone can learn something from the mistakes that we've made so that they too don't make them, or if they've made those mistakes and are wondering if they can overcome them. Well, hopefully our stories, we're everyday people. Like last time I checked, neither one of us are showing up on the Forbes most wealthiest list anytime soon.
Nope.
And I'll be honest, I actually don't want to be. I mean, if it happened, it happened, but it's not my goal.
Right. No, it's certainly not something that's on my radar. But like we talk about things like this, and this tells you how resilient people are. Like, so you're gonna have this person on, and I'm interested in hearing their story because it just shows what we should be celebrating as a society. Just like years ago when I started getting into cycling and triathlons, I saw a dude do an Ironman. Dude had no legs. Shut up, man. Come on, man. You can do it.
So check this out, right? One of the best golfers I've played with is legally blind in one eye. He can't see in the other, and he's only got one leg, and dude was like a 5 handicap.
Yeah.
Now, he could tell where his golf ball went based on the divot. Okay, yep, I hit this about 200 yards. Ooh, This one's going to be about 200, but I'm going to be on the left or I'm going to be on the right.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, he's a 5 handicap. I'm not at my best. I was not a single digit. I mean, I hope I'll get into the single digits, but my best year, I was a 12 handicap. Best. That means this cat can't see, only has one leg, and he's 7 strokes better than me. Right. On my best day, he's 7 strokes better than me.
Right.
Anyway, it's just it goes to show, as you said, exactly how resilient we can be when we choose to be.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you have to choose to fight. And it's really always a struggle against yourself. This is why even when I was studying literature, right, I was always into the man versus man or man versus himself archetype. Those are the compelling stories.
I thought it was dwarf versus dwarf.
Hey, sure, man, sometimes. So somebody asked me today, like we were talking about sports, and one of my students on one of my research teams was a nationally ranked swimmer in high school. Another one was like a nationally ranked cross-country runner, and they're talking about this stuff, and I'm like, okay, I understand that because I've done those types of activities, but that's not what I'm built for. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, dude, look at me. I'm built like a bowling ball. Like, that's not my sweet spot. My sweet spot is like 5-minute power on a bike, right? I'm not good over long distances, and I'm not good on a sprint. Give me 5 minutes. That's where I'm good, right? Put heavy weight on me. I can carry it for a little bit of time.
I just live a quarter mile at a time.
That's right, man. But through trial and error, by being resilient and suffering through multiple failures, I've figured out where I'm best suited.
Well, I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? I mean, we've talked about this constantly. We double and triple down on our strengths.
Mm-hmm.
It does not make any sense. Okay, could you possibly get, if I was training for 5 minutes for a 5-minute race, am I going to be training for that in 5-minute increments? No, I'm probably going to train for that with a lot of long distance so I can run that 5 minutes faster.
That's right. Exactly.
Because I'm never going to run 5 minutes faster if I only ever run 5 minutes.
Right. Right.
So, right. The way in which you train, it might be a little bit different. But, and knowing those things, okay, well, then Jason would probably be pretty good in a relay race. Mm-hmm. Maybe you want this. Maybe you want that. Maybe you want yourself in that. The anchor,
mm-hmm.
And also because you're like a bowling ball, and so you're just going to sink to the bottom anyway, right? But
well said, man. Well said.
But the thing is, you got to put people in the position to succeed.
And you have to. I've noticed in as part of the leadership part, and then it switches into the management part. The leadership part is. Here's a framework or a structure we're going to operate within which, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find out where your maximum limit is. Let's find out what that is, so then we can scale back and find the sweet spot behind that, right? And then we have the framework. We know what those limits are. Now we can manage our way over these milestones that we already pre-planned to that end goal. Because that's really just making sure you show up and keep the momentum going, in my estimation.
Absolutely. Well said. And that is a great parting words for our friends out there watching. We're all resilient when you choose to be resilient and just move forward.
Amen.
Well, my friend, thank you again. Cheers.
Always a pleasure.
Everyone out there. Don't forget to subscribe. For those that may have made it this far, and tune in this Sunday right around 7:45 in the morning with Coffee with TK. We're going to hear a little bit about Amelia's story. I think everyone will be inspired to do great things after hearing her. So, cheers, everyone. Thank you. Take care.
Good night, Stoney. Bye.